So welcome back everybody, my name is Paul and I'm a country realtor out in Virginia. And today I'm going to talk about some great books that are for homesteaders and people living on the land. And there's a lot to know when you go out in the countryside, and I'm a specialist in that area. And people come out and they live in a city maybe, and they're retiring or they're moving out in the country, and a lot of young people are also looking to homestead. And there's a lot that people who have grown up in a city, for example, don't really know about living in the country. So I try to give professional information and advice about various aspects of buying and selling real estate. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about some books that are really great for people who are developing their own homesteads. I want to express my appreciation for people who are out there trying to homestead, because we really need farms. We need that kind of activity. Virginia, where I live, is full of lots of homesteads and private farms, and it's a beautiful thing to see. Mile after mile, people are having their goats and chickens in their yards and their streams and their ponds and everything, and it's collectively a tremendous resource. And we really do need that, because once upon a time a lot of people moved out back to the city because that was where the jobs were and everything, and then a lot of country properties got neglected and a lot of them went downhill, and great farms and so on were slowly broken up. And there is a new movement in this country right now to get out into the homestead area and just really live like the normal, so-called normal people, that the way people used to live a long time ago when the country was settled, which is basically closest to the land, and you get more involved with building your structures and your life there, as opposed to just getting a turnkey situation in the suburb with a cul-de-sac and a little yard, and you move in and that's it. You know, you can't really operate the property as a homestead in the same way that is traditional. So I got some great books here. First of all, this is a really great book called the First Person Rural. I'm getting in this here. I've gotten into it a few chapters, and it's about a personal journey that someone had when they decided to sell their land, their place in the city, and move out the country. And it's kind of a humorous little journey. It was set back quite a few years ago. It was a recent book, but the setting of it, and it happened, I think it was back in the 70s or something, or 80s. That's a great book, First Person Rural. Now, a lot of people want to build their house and they want to have it made, and they don't know about the process. So I got a couple books here. The Home Building Process. This is a really great book. I'm reading this book, and it's a resource here basically. But to find out, like, what's the process when you want to build a house. You got to have a lot of contractors, and they all have their own style and regulations, and they got to work with each other, and it's a process, and there's weather delays and things like that. So it's a really great thing to know how the process works for having contractors come and build your house. Now, you as a builder, as an owner, you want to stay out of their way most of the time. The constructors, they need their own freedom to act, and they have their own understanding of their job and so on. So you can play an intermediary role by contacting each of them and being helpful to them in every possible way. So a great book. Shed working. Boy, if you live in the country, it's really great to have a shed, because you got to have tools and supplies and things like that. And it's just a great thing. So there's many different kinds of sheds. This has, like, you can build really classy, beautiful sheds that have so much function but meld into your property. It doesn't have to be ugly. You can really have a very attractive utility building. The Complete Yurt book. Yurts are a wonderful way, and a very inexpensive way, relatively speaking, to get a home on a piece of property. They can be disassembled later. You could live in it for a while and maybe sell a yurt if you want. You have to build a platform, and then you probably need a septic and a well or something. But a yurt is a really great building. If you build one and then later you build a traditional home, the yurt can serve as a meeting place or some kind of a craft room or studio or something like that. A yurt is a great alternative to some kind of a shed that you might buy manufactured. Secrets of the Soil. I haven't read this whole book yet, but boy, it goes into some really great detail about really how to work with your soil. And a lot of people who want to garden, I'm not particularly, I don't have a lot of time to spend on a garden, but there are a lot of people do, and they're really good at it. But you learn about the soil, and this book here is by Peter Tompkins. Great book. Sundials, the old-fashioned way of telling time. You can put one on your property and make it really attractive. Part of a garden is a fun thing to do, and this particular book has a lot of different diagrams and information about how to build different kinds of sundials. Interesting book. Book of Survival. You live out in the woods, you're not necessarily going to be bushwhacking and so on, but it's good to know certain skills and how to be out in the woods and the wildlife that's there, and different resources and different plants, and how to find a spring on your property, and a lot of first aid kind of stuff. It's a good thing to have some kind of information when you have a homestead about survival and off-grid living and that sort of thing. Another book called The Well-Built House. Beautiful, by Jim Locke. It really helps to know how homes are built and what's a good home, and how, like for example, you can see siding that's cheap siding, or you can see siding that's done well. Same with the roof, same with foundations. There are techniques that you can learn about so that when you have a house built or you build it yourself, that you know what are the ingredients of a really well-built house, and how the engineers think about the various structures and how they go together. So, great book. One more, beekeeping. Beekeeping, we need those bees. We really, really need bees. Now, out in the countryside, there's a lot of bees. And, for example, there are different kinds of bees. I've only learned a little bit about them. They're not all honeybees, but there are honeybees, and sometimes they'll actually find a place in the chimney of a house or under the eaves or the soffits or something. And if you have a property, like I know a friend of mine a few years ago, she had found a tree fell down on her property, and it had a huge honey-filled bee's nest in it, just so she got loads of fresh honey right off her own land. A really beautiful fortune there. But bees, at least learn about them, find out what they do and how you can help them. Apparently, you're putting out water in the summertime, bees can get thirsty and die of dehydration. So there's simple things that you can do to encourage the bees on your property, because they, even if they're not making honey, they're going to be going from flower to flower, and they're going to be helping your wildlife or your plant life on your property, especially like the fruiting trees and so on in your local garden. Now, I have a lot more books. One more that I would quickly recommend you, that a few more here actually. Earth ponds. A pond is not a common feature on property. I'm a realtor right now, and I know that I see quite a few properties that are near streams in Virginia. We have loads and loads of ravines and streams in the valleys and the hills, and then in the eastern part there's some larger rivers, and some of them are quite meandering and they have tributary. So basically there's quite a bit of land in Virginia that has at least some water feature, but it's not common to find a pond. Now, you can build a pond, you have to get permission and so on, and you have to look at the engineering and the way that the land is and so on. But there's a lot of springs in Virginia, so if you have a spring on your property, then you might want to make a small pond to collect some of that water and have some fish in it. Not necessarily a huge pond, but there's ways and techniques of how to build them and so on, and this is just one of them. And you got to be careful. There's certain legal things that you may have to go through with your town or county when you decide to build a pond, because they want to know that you're not going to flood downstream from you. Earth sheltered housing. People use earth sheltered housing. Essentially, a cave is an earth sheltered housing, but there's ways now in the modern era. If you have land, for example, that's got a slope, then you can build a house where the back end of it, I sold a house last year that had that. The back end of it, one side was the first floor was under the level of the ground because of the slope, and that basically meant there's no windows on that side, but at the same time then that wall was not exposed to the wind. It had a stable temperature. You just got to be careful about water sealing and so on when you have a wall or something against the earth. But this is a great book, and it's called Earth Sheltered Housing Design. And one more for the adventurous, Practicing Primitive. This is a really great book about people who went out and they actually used primitive technology to build a structure or some tools and so on. And it's a great book to get inspired about how people came to this country, or they settled land anywhere in the world where they just had to cut down trees and they started totally from scratch. There was no architectural design, and you just had to build with raw stone or branches and wood and timber that you cut down. So basically it's kind of a fun book, and for anyone interested in bushcrafting, I think that's a really great thing to learn, actually learning how to make primitive structures. When I was young, I grew up in mountains, and when we were kids we used to go into the hills and build a little hut and put little branches on the top and use our penknife, and we got little hatchets after a while and make little huts. So it's a nice thing to do and fun, and certainly it's fun for the kids. So thanks again for listening. I appreciate people coming to my site and learning about buying and selling real estate. I'm a homestead specialist. I buy and I'm a realtor in a rural area, Western Virginia, near Lexington, about 75 miles from the border of West Virginia. Beautiful Shenandoah Valley. Anyone who is thinking of making a homestead, Virginia has the most private farms of any state in our country, and it's a lovely environment around here with a long growing season, and we do have the 4 seasons in the winter, and so in the hills you get some beautiful snow, but it doesn't stay terribly long. So thanks again for listening. Please like and share, and I hope to see you in some of my other videos.